Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Danny Smythe. I'm the Chief of Police. With me this afternoon is Mayor Scott Gillingham, who will speak in support of the community and the families in a short while. I know the Chair of the Police Board, Marcus Chambers, is here with us, as well as Inspector Pike, who will provide a little more detail afterwards as well. And finally, our family support advocate, Angie Tuesday, is with us as well, and she may have a message on behalf of the family a little later. On May 19th, 2022, the Winnipeg Police released information relative to the arrest of Jeremy Skibicki in relation to the murder of 24-year-old Rebecca Contois, who was originally from Crane River First Nations. Today I'm here to publicly report 3 additional murders Jeremy Skibicki has been charged with. Over the last 6 months, our homicide unit, along with other specialized units that included missing persons, identification, and forensics, they've all worked diligently investigating Skibicki's activity. This morning, investigators attended to the Milner Ridge Correctional Facility and charged him with 3 additional first-degree murder charges. He's been charged with the murder of Morgan Beatrice Harris, 39 years old, of Winnipeg, and a member of the Long Plain First Nations. Investigators believe that Morgan Harris was killed on or about May 1st, 2022. Skibicki has also been charged with the murder of Marcedes Myran, 26 years old, of Winnipeg, and also a member of the Long Plains First Nation. Investigators believe Marcedes Myran was killed on or about May 4th, 2022. A third charge of first-degree murder is in relation to a female that we have yet to identify. Investigators believe this female was killed by Skibicki on or about March 15th, 2022. Now, I'm not in a position to provide much in the way of investigative detail. We will have Inspector Pike address you a little bit later in this press conference. I think I'll close by offering my condolences to the family for these senseless and tragic acts. We will do our best to support the families now and into the future as these investigations move towards prosecutions. Before asking Mayor Gillingham up to the podium, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of Inspector Pike, the homicide investigators, and all of those who have helped support this investigation, and the families for forever being changed by this senseless violence. So with that, Mayor Gillingham.
Thank you, Chief Smythe, Inspector Pike, Angie, Councillor Marcus Chambers, Chair of the Police Board. On behalf of the citizens of Winnipeg, I want to express my sincere sorrow to the families of these young women. And actually, condolences are not strong enough. Anger and sorrow, that mix is what I'm feeling right now. And I think that many in our city are going to be feeling the same today at this news. These women were members of our community. They're someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's mother, someone's friend. And as a city, we must all grieve their loss and recognize that we have much more work to do. More work to do to protect the lives of Indigenous women and girls, including Two-Spirited and LGBTQ people. We have more to do to address safety across this community. Right now, there are far too many people experiencing homelessness, addiction, and poverty, and that puts them into vulnerable positions. And there's too much violent crime. There's far too many homicides. This marks 50 homicides, a record, and that's unacceptable. I know for the chief and for the service, I know it's unacceptable to them. They've expressed as much. As mayor, as a citizen, I cannot accept that, and as a city, we must not accept that. We need to do more. I want to acknowledge today groups like Mama Wichita and Kani Kanichak and so many other organizations who are on the front lines day and night, doing important work to keep our community safe, and specifically to work with and to assist Indigenous women and girls. I want to thank them for their work. Different levels of government, including the City of Winnipeg, recently committed to an expansion of Velma's House, which provides safe space for Indigenous women who are fleeing intimate partner violence, who are vulnerable. And this is an incredible, important resource, but we need to do more. I recently met with newly elected Grand Chief Kathy Merrick, and I committed to building a stronger working partnership and an open relationship with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, all of their communities, and the entire Indigenous community of our city. And later today, and in the days ahead, I'll be speaking with Indigenous leaders from across our province to offer my condolences on behalf of the people of Winnipeg, and to talk about ways that we can work together to make changes to prevent tragedies like this from reoccurring. But of course, today is not just about expressing thoughts and prayers. It's about making real efforts towards real change that will reduce gender-based violence and race-related violence. And in closing, I want to acknowledge the work of Chief Smyth, Inspector Pike, Angie Tuesday, the members of the Winnipeg Police Service who've been working diligently and remain working diligently on all of these files. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Provincial Crown Attorneys, who have very important work that they've already done, and certainly important work ahead. This is a painful day for Winnipeg, and we must never become numb to the horrors of the news that we're hearing today, because every homicide represents a life. As a father, as a husband, I feel deep sorrow for these lives that have been lost far too early. We must do all we can to make the change that is necessary to keep Winnipeggers safe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to speak to you briefly from the investigative aspect of what's going on. The first thing I'll say is please appreciate this is an ongoing, very sensitive matter, and I won't be able to provide any details regarding specific aspects of the investigation at that time. This being said, I think it's important for everyone in the room to understand, to be clear, that this investigation is not over. Our officers will continue to search for information with the goal of identifying this fourth unknown victim. It's important for every single person in this room and beyond to appreciate somewhere out there, there's a family and a community that are missing a loved one and truly deserve to know what happened. Today, we're asking for your help. We're calling on everyone, including the media, to help us identify this female. It doesn't matter how trivial you may think your information may be, give us a chance. Give us a chance to follow it up, because the last thing that we want is for this fourth victim to remain a Jane Doe. It's not acceptable. We believe she is an Indigenous female, likely in her mid-20s with an average build. Behind me, you're going to see pictures of these jackets, and just for clarity, this is actually the same jacket. We believe that this this female wore this type of jacket in these colors. This jacket is reversible, so you'll see black on the one side, striped on the other. It's a matter of turning the jacket inside out. On the striped side, there's writing across the bottom, and it says baby fat on it. It's BABYPHAT. There's a crest on the right or on the left front of the striped jacket. And when it's inverted with the black, there's a symbol on the back that appears to resemble a cat. And on the top left shoulder area, it says baby fat, same spelling. If these details or this clothing is familiar to you, we are asking any member of the public, again, as I say, media, anybody, if you have any information that you think may assist investigators with this, please reach out to us. Please reach out to our homicide unit at 204-986-6508 or at Winnipeg Crime Stoppers, and that's 204-786-TIPS-8477. And again, on behalf of all investigators and everyone at the police service, our condolences, our sincerest condolences, as the chief said, goes out to the families and communities affected. Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up to questions.
Maybe we'll let Angie just bring some messages on behalf of the family.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Angie Tuesday. I'm a family support and resource advocate with Winnipeg Police Service. I had opportunity to connect with the families of Morgan and Marcedes. They have asked for privacy at this time. They didn't want any contact from the news media because they need time to grieve. What I will say is this, community supports have mobilized to ensure that there are supports available to both families, and that's something that we will continue to do going forward, as this is a tremendously difficult time for both these families that we're discussing today, as well as all of the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people in Manitoba. For those watching who may be impacted, I just want to extend my condolences again to the families of these women, of Marcedes, of Rebecca, of Morgan, and of this unidentified female. And I want to let people know that we are thinking of you and our hearts are with you at this time. There are supports available to you and to, again, other family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people who will understandably be having difficulty managing and coping with this tragic news. I think I'll leave it there. Miigwech.
So I know we had 4 different speakers here, so if you do have a specific question for someone, just let me know who you want to talk to.
Chief, we'll start with you. Can you tell us how you cracked the case? Were these women missing? Did you find something in this suspect's house? Can you just give us a little bit more insight?
I'm not going to be able to give you a lot. To be fair, the investigation was handled by homicide, and any speaking on the investigation, I'll leave for Inspector Pike if you want.
Chief Smythe, what's the general message to the public about the complexities of these investigations and the fact that these charges have now been laid? Tell us about what goes into this type of work.
Well, as you can see, the original arrest of Mr. Skibicki was in May, so there was a lot of legwork that went into identifying these other 3 victims. It takes some time. A lot of forensic work went into it, a lot of lab work. That's in part of the delay. And then, of course, the family supports that are necessary to help along the way. All of that is factored in to where we are today. Now this will transition to a prosecution.
Were Indigenous women being specifically targeted?
Pardon me?
Were Indigenous women being specifically targeted?
I don't know if they were specifically being targeted, but clearly the victims in this are all Indigenous women.
Chief, as the Chief of Police, a message to the public about coming forward with information. We heard a little bit about it from Inspector Pike, but as the lead of this agency, what's your message to the public who maybe know something?
Our community has always been very good at coming forward with things that help assist our investigators. There have been numerous examples over the years where they have provided us with the leads necessary for our investigators to complete their work. This is some pretty specific information tied to these jackets. I have no doubt that people will recognize it and conceivably come forward.
Can you just tell us how unsettling today is? This is a serial killer in Winnipeg. Can you just talk about how unsettling this is? People are going to be quite frightened by this news.
Well, first of all, it's always unsettling when there's any kind of a serial killing. This isn't the first time in our history that we've encountered this. Mr. Skibicki's been in custody and has been in custody since May, so there is no danger out in the community relative to any of the investigative process here. But it's, of course, unsettling. It's unsettling because it does involve Indigenous women. We're very sensitive to the whole missing and murdered Indigenous women investigation and inquiry and the recommendations that come out of that. This is top of mind for us. It's something that we work with our partners to try to prevent this kind of stuff, doing a lot of outreach work with many of the community support agencies out there so that it doesn't come to this.
Were you able to get all of the remains from each of the victims? And I ask because with the first victim, as you know, you only had partial remains at first.
Right. So we haven't recovered the bodies of the other 3 victims. We have enough evidence for first-degree murder.
Are there potentially other victims?
None that we're aware of. We have no additional leads that are any other people that have been associated to anything to do with Mr. Skibicki.
And on the first-degree murder charge, how common is it to lay a first-degree murder charge when you don't know the identity of the victim? And is that problematic? And it's probably more of a question for the Crown, but is that problematic going to trial?
It's not unheard of. You're right. It is probably a question more for the Crown to speak to, but it is, it's not unprecedented for charges to be laid, first degree or otherwise, even without a body.
In a situation like this, does a review take place entirely to find out? We've seen examples in other cities where maybe some things are missed during investigations. I'm not saying that is the situation here, but will an investigation or a review take place internally to find out if something was missed potentially and that this suspect could have been stopped sooner?
The first victim, of course, was Rebecca Contois that we discovered, and we reported on that back in May. He was arrested right during that time. As you've heard us describe, the other investigations or the other murders happened all within a short time of that. So it was all within a fairly condensed period of time.
Chief, this might be a question for Inspector, but what were the relationship between these women and Mr. Skibicki, if anything?
I don't know, to be fair, but it will form part of the investigation, ultimately part of the prosecution.
Do the police believe that, we've got different dates here, does the police believe that the victims were all killed in the same place, same location?
Again, that'll form part of the investigation as to what led up to first-degree murder charges being filed. But the victims and their murders all happened within weeks of each other.
And you say the bodies have not been recovered. Is there another? Does this tie in with the landfill again, or is it something totally different?
I'm sorry?
Does this tie in with another search of the landfill, or is this something different?
No, I don't foresee an additional search of the landfill.
But you already used the word, though. It's the definition of a serial killer.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair comment. There are 4 very specific murders as part of this investigation.
I might have missed this, but the victim he was originally arrested for, where does that fall in what order?
Do you recall? Yeah, go ahead. I'll let Inspector Pike answer that.
Yeah, so how the order has gone is we believe the unknown female was our first victim. Morgan Harris was the second victim. Marcedes Myran was the third victim, and Rebecca Contois was the 4th victim.
Are you considering any kind of hate charges? I know the chief said he couldn't speak to if they were specifically targeted for being Indigenous, but I asked because after the first killing, that was something that had come up in the media. There was talk about potential hate charges and if they should be laid in these types of situations. Is that something you're looking at? And I also asked just because the accused Facebook did have white supremacist material on it.
Sure. What I can tell you is that when our homicide unit put their package together in consultation with the Crowns at Manitoba Justice, the charges that came back were the 3 additional first-degree murder charges, with obviously the first one for Rebecca Contois. So right now, those are the charges that are outstanding.
Were you using these are recovered? Is there a possibility of indecency to human dealing charges, things like that?
Well, again, that's speculation, right? We don't, as the chief said, we haven't recovered remains at this point, so I wouldn't want to speculate on something like that.
Where are you on that? Are you whether in particular these remains? Do you have any idea?
Again, investigation-wise, we believe there, quite honestly, that there were things very similar to Rebecca Contois. But our investigators are still working through parts of the file.
Inspector, besides being Indigenous, is there anything that ties these women together into each other? Anything along those lines?
Again, I think these might be some aspects that would come out through the investigation itself or through the court process. So, as you can appreciate, I'm trying to tread very lightly through certain details. So that's why.
I'm going to ask one last question for me. When he was arrested initially, an extensive search of his apartment, some material being taken out of there, was that investigation kind of triggered by what was found in this individual's apartment following the Contois murder?
Again, I think we're starting to work our way into specifics of the investigation, and I'd like to stay away from there.
So could I ask something specifically that's been touched on? Do police know or have a good idea of where the victims are?
As far as knowing, I would say if we knew where the victims were, 100%, we would have been able to recover the bodies.
But they were all killed in Winnipeg, is that the thought?
That's our belief, yes.
With this suspect, I guess, or alleged serial killer, was this person stalking a particular area or particular locations where maybe these victims frequented?
Again, as I've said before, I'm treading very carefully around anything that deals with the investigative package that's gone to the Crowns. So any kind of details I would prefer not to speak about, just so it doesn't jeopardize anything going forward.
Was DNA used at all?
There was a DNA component, yes.
Can you elaborate on that and just explain for us how that might have helped you crack the case, if at all?
Again, what I can speak to, I guess, in DNA in general, I don't want to really speak to the specifics, but DNA in general is, as a lot of you have heard over the years, it's a time-consuming process. It's a very true evidence-based process where we have scientists involved, and the process unfolds, and it takes a bit of time. But generally speaking, that's how DNA works for us.
Are police interviewing anybody alongside Skibicki, or interviewing anybody else in terms of this case, or looking at anybody else?
As the chief said, no, we're of the belief with the information we have right now that Skibicki acted alone, and we haven't had anything over this course of the last 6 months to suggest anything else.
And was there anything in the landfill during the initial search for Rebecca Contois that helped you with these 3 additional?
Again, the evidence that came out of that landfill search was released to the public, and it was in relation to Rebecca Contois.
After I've been this, do you believe that all these women were killed in the same place?
Again, we're kind of looking at some investigative components there, so I think I'll reserve comment at this point.
When we're talking about like DNA, if you don't have bodies, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Could it have been like blood in an apartment, or like what does that mean specifically if you're saying DNA was utilized here?
Again, what I'll leave it at is that DNA was utilized. I don't want to get into the specifics of the case, and that's directly dealing with specifics when I'm talking about what kind of DNA. So.
But it was utilized?
DNA was utilized, yes.
Is there a way to explain why this person why the suspect was doing this? Is there a motive? How do you explain to the public why?
Prosecution.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question, and I think at the end of the day, that's up to Mr. Skibicki to decide if he wants to reveal what the reason for all this.
Has he been cooperating?
Again, I won't speak to the specifics. Thank you.
On the there's some science involved here. Was there also information from the community that helped you put this together?
Sorry, could you say that
Was
again?
there also information from the community that helped you put a picture together?
I can tell you our officers from all these units, as the chief had mentioned, have come together from our homicide unit to our identification unit. Lots of interviews were done. Information was gleaned from communications that we had with throughout the investigation. I'll leave it at that.
Can you say whether or not someone came to you with information that knew something about these phones?
I can't say.
Are you able to say how you were able to determine that the fourth victim was the first one? Or like the fourth? Here you have the was killed on March.
How our unidentified female is the first victim. That just came out through the course of the investigation as our officers put the timeline together, tracking Mr. Skibicki's actions. That's how they came to that conclusion.
And the coat, was that found in his residence, or like, can you just fill us in on how that came about?
Again, I think when it comes to that jacket, and I'm glad you're asking about it because it's an important part of today, is that the big takeaway is to get this information out to the public about that jacket and give us a chance to help identify this victim. As to where it came from or our information on it, I'm not going to speak about that, but again, I'll speak about the importance of this, how this can help a family and a community if we can all get together to solve this.
So, and maybe just talk a little bit specifically about the jacket itself. You know, what kind of information are you looking for? Like, is this if the person was seen in a certain area wearing this jacket? If someone sold someone this jacket? If a merchant was selling these jackets? You know, what should the public kind of be honing in on when it comes to this actual piece of clothing?
I'll tell you, great question. We'll take any information in regards to it. Ultimately, in a perfect world, we have someone come and tell us that they knew exactly who was wearing a jacket like this. That's ultimately what we're hoping for.
One last one from me. I don't mean any disrespect to this, but if you don't have a body, how can you be certain someone's dead?
Well, again, it's part of an extensive investigation. What I can tell you is that a package went to the Crown attorneys. They reviewed it, and based on all the evidence that they had a chance to review, they authorized the first-degree murder charge, which, as you know, is a very serious charge.
And Chief Smith, my apologies, you spoke to this a little bit, but Inspector, your message to the public about the last time there was this type of investigation, you know, in terms of specifics, when was the last time you recall this many people involved, this many victims, and frankly, one potential suspect?
Are you asking me about the last time that Sean Lamb was his name? Sean Lamb. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Stamas. But Sean Lamb was one that stood out for me.
Take a couple more.
Chief Smith touched on it, but your message really to the public is that women shouldn't be scared. You're confident there's no other victims, because I think, you know, there's a lot of missing Indigenous women still in Manitoba, and the families are going to be watching this and wondering maybe it's just a good time to share a sentiment.
Well, what I can tell you in the specifics of this, as was touched on already, Jeremy Skibicki was arrested as soon as we were aware of what was going on. He has been housed in a correctional facility since that time, and he has not, to my knowledge, been released at any given moment. So public safety is always a concern with us when we come across something like this, and we know that he was not in the public since we've been made aware of him.
But you don't think there'll be any more victims than the ones listed here?
We have no information to suggest there'll be anyone else.
Can you talk about, like, how can something like this happen? How did it get to this point?
Again, I'm definitely not going to make excuses for Mr. Skibicki, I'll tell you that. I think those are questions for him.
Anything else? Okay. Any questions?